welcome back, ladies and gents. I'm your host, Sully, and once again, for another sit down with a professionally working filmmaker, I have Jon Keeyes.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yes, his work includes The Living and Dying, Rogue Hostage, The Survivalist, and most recently, Codename Banshee. Sorry, I butchered that last part. Codename Banshee. He has operated the production company Highland Mitts Entertainment for quite a while now, and has distributed deals with Image Entertainment, Quiver Distribution, and Redbox. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And so this was just kind of cool to know, because just when doing my research, it was like, wow, I've seen more movies than I even realized. I didn't realize he worked on King Cobra or Welcome to Willets and so many others. And what drove you back when you were a moviegoer, and where you just eventually just realized, hey, I just have this creative oyster, and I gotta let it out.
No, it's kind of funny. I actually fell into filmmaking. I never actually intended to be a filmmaker.
Never planned it.
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles with a family that absolutely loved movies. My grandfather was a bit actor back in the 40s when he was going to USC.
Oh, sweet.
But we all just had a love of movies, but no real connection to filmmaking. And writing is what I always wanted to do. I intended to be a novelist and a journalist and things like that. And journalism is what I ended up doing. And I became an entertainment journalist working out of Texas, and working on all the big movies at the time and stuff. And I just decided to write a screenplay that I thought I might try to sell. And a friend of mine, Brink Stevens, popular Scream Queen actress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Small world.
Brink and I were friends, and I asked Brink to read the script just to give me some feedback. And she's like, well, you should just go make this yourself. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea.
Anybody can do it.
That's exactly it. And so my friend Richard Carey and we formed Highland Mist, and we spent about a year putting everything together to figure it all out, because we'd never made anything before. But we spent a year, and then we shot American Nightmare, my first movie. And like day 2 of filming, I got to set, and I was just like, I can't do anything else but this ever again, and just completely fell in love with it and never looked back. And fortunately, when American Nightmare came out, it did so well that I started getting other production companies and distributors and stuff asking me to make movies for them. And so I've now spent 23 years writing, directing, and producing.
Man. And that was back in 2002. So
yeah. And it was kind of crazy. Even like earlier this year, I don't know, I was putting together a bio for something or other, and I had to kind of look something up, and I looked at IMDb, and it said something like, you've got like, Jon Keeyes has like 60 credits. And I was like, holy cow, because I haven't kept track, and I didn't even realize. Yeah, it was kind of extraordinary to see that, and I've been basically making a living as a filmmaker for 20 years now.
1,000%. And so for those who've been under a rock, this was when DVD was first blowing up the market and cable TV was more fair game. Everyone found different routes of distribution. How did that encourage you, now that you were finally for the first part, where you're like, okay, I can do this myself with the right amount of confidence and time?
It was it was interesting. It's been a really just intriguing transition throughout the whole process. Because like you said, when I made this, digital wasn't even out yet. Everybody was still shooting on film. And when American Nightmare was released, it was released on VHS with DVD, even though VHS was still the bigger thing. And it was back when, if you made a horror movie, you could just sell it, and so I've just kind of, as technology has changed and the distribution platform has changed, I just realized that, if I'm going to stay part of all of this and I'm going to be relevant, I have to learn all of this. So even like when I made my second movie, HD was just becoming a thing, and and a post house an equipment house in Dallas found out I was doing the second movie, and they called me and they're like, listen, we just got the first HD camera into Dallas. If we give it to you, would you shoot your movie on it so we could say that the movie's been shot? And I was like, sure. And I remember me and my DP and my first AC and the only person in America who knew how to operate this camera in Seattle, like all of us on the phone every night figuring out how to operate this camera.
I can't get Roger Deakins, but I can get the number one HD camera guy doing various events. What was his as a side quest, what was his break in the door? Was he doing like freelance for like ESPN and commercials?
He was actually with, and I'm trying to remember, I'm pretty sure it was Panasonic. And it was just, he actually, yeah, and he worked for Panasonic, and he had helped develop the HD camera. So he was like one of the few people that understood how to operate a camera and how to do the menus and all of that kind of stuff. So he was a technician that basically was starting to help people out. We had to learn, we didn't have to learn workflow. We had to create a workflow to figure out how to even do post this way.
Before when Michael Mann went digital with Collateral, and
before that
was embracing it.
Exactly.
Every major TV network, those first years when they went from film to digital, like we're talking the Star Trek and even Law and Order shows, is like some of them a little rough, like, whoa, not sure you know how to use that zoom the right
That's
way.
exactly it.
It's a little too fast for even HD. It looks like a student film.
Yeah. So, I mean, like there was that one. And then my third movie, Sony had just come out with their first, I think it was the F900. And so we got to use that camera.
Savior.
It's just, and it's just, throughout the years, because I love that kind of thing and I'm a geek for that, just, I've always wanted to embrace new technology as it kind of moves along. And then same way with the distribution world, just really always staying in touch with what is the distribution world right now, where is everything going, and always trying to stay relevant, in that way, to learn and keep, be able to keep getting the movie out the best I can. Because I mean, even back those first, handful of movies, there was no such thing as, paper, digital on demand or in streaming or anything like that. So we just kind of, as new platforms opened up, we found ways to take the old movies and get them onto those platforms as well. And, and of course, nowadays, most everything, you just go through one distributor and the one distributor handles everything, getting it out to all of the platforms and stuff. But it's been a really fun ride following that evolution of everything and staying a part of that.
1,000%. So did you have any other mentors, like pals who you just always could, just they gave you a pat on the back and just said, just chase it?
Initially, not really, because I was never involved in the film community. I was doing journalism? Journalism. I mean, it was funny is I had become friends with a handful of actors such as Brink Stevens, Debbie Rochon, some of these different actors, the
Debbie's
indie actors.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, I love Debbie. I mean, I did, as a journalist, I did some stuff on Robert Rodriguez's movies. So I knew Elizabeth Avalon, and I, when I was getting ready to make my first movie, I think it was on The Faculty.
Wow.
But I would get feedback from Elizabeth and some of the different indie filmmakers, back then that I had just kind of known through journalism. I would kind of talk with them and get feedback from them and get input. And a lot of it at the time also was just all these interviews I had been doing with filmmakers over the years, kind of taking everything I had learned from them and then applying it. And like even on American Nightmare, like I said, I wasn't part of the film community. I'm making this up, but I was like, okay, well, I need to hire a professional DP, a professional editor, a professional sound mixer, people who had been around enough to help us put this together properly. I leaned a lot on them. And then particularly in the Dallas film community, because I was there for so long, as I slowly began to meet other filmmakers and things like that, we would all sort of support each other and rely on each other and bounce ideas off of each other. And I still got, even now today, I'm still like the Dallas community, the Texas community, and then other places that I've worked with. That indie world is so tight that we all kind of talk to each other and bounce ideas off of each other and learn and grow through each other.
Who to go to, who to avoid, who to just instantly is like, hey, we connect, we're magnetic.
Exactly. Yeah.
About face.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So everybody always helping each other. I think that was an important part of all of this.
Perfect. What's been your favorite camera to utilize so far on your work?
It depends. Over the last I don't know,
It's
7 to
changing every
10.
3 years now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've got a DP that I work with a lot, Austin Schmidt. I'm a very collaborative filmmaker. And, so when I get involved, particularly with the DP, and I'm kind of sharing my vision for the movie and how I want it to look and such, I've got my own ideas, but I'm also sort of defaulting to the DP because I want the DP's voice to be heard through his cinematography, through their cinematography. And so, I mean, we tend to shoot on the Airy minis. We tend to shoot on the Red Dragons. It really kind of, we end up now shooting more like we establish what the look is we want, and then we determine what camera and lenses are going to provide that best look. So we kind of we jump around based on the aesthetic of the film.
Oh, perfect. And I got to commend you for, especially when you did the Survivalist and Rogue Hostage. Those were cool because they went back to the first rule of any kind of indie filmmaking: one location, one gimmick. And it was just cool to just see that, because I'm seeing so many utilize it and they run out of money. I'm like, you're not going to be able to do that car chase on the highway. Why not just go to a junkyard and find the nearest destroyed car, and that's the aftermath. It's even more powerful as opposed to trying to film it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's something that I try to, like, up and coming filmmakers, that I always kind of try to talk to them about was, I started off completely on my own and had to learn everything. And so part of my skill set throughout the years has been production management and line producing and building budgets and all of that, and understanding the business side. So as these, over the last 5 years, particularly when I'm doing a movie, I'm usually given a budget versus like taking a script and going, here's what it's going to cost. The producers are like, here's how much you get, and then figuring out how to do it. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with shooting a 1 location movie or, a 3 location movie. It's about how to utilize your money and how to still tell a really good story. I mean, it goes back to Robert and his philosophy of, the best stuff I've done and the most creative I get is when I don't have anything. And so I try to apply that.
Sky's the limit.
Yeah, exactly. So just get creative with what you have. Yeah. Well, I've seen so many filmmakers that burn themselves because, just like what you said, they don't know how to budget, and then they end up with scripts that are unshootable and they don't ever get to finish them, or they try to do something.
If I don't have this shot, it means nothing. I'm like, then why not this other cool shot?
Exactly. Yeah. There's lots of ways to be creative and tell a story without having to blow stuff
you and
up.
I. How many of your fellow just comrades did you ever encounter and they acted like, well, if I can't shoot with this, I can't shoot it? I'm like, no, BS.
Yep, 100%. I've actually,
you can always remake this with a bigger production and cast, and no one will care, and everyone will be even happier. But at least you got your feet wet with this first entry. There's plenty of people who will watch your movie and there's no big name in it.
Yeah, exactly. If you tell a really good story, it will find its audience.
Always.
Yeah.
Not everyone knew who Barbara Crampton was when Charles Band made Puppet Master.
Right.
It was the biggest VHS
exactly. There. I love Barbara too.
Oh yeah, she's amazing. Who's been your favorites of the various cast members on each project to work with?
I mean,
you worked with Malkovich twice.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, I've worked with so many great actors and so many people I love. Obviously, I've done 2 movies with Malkovich, and I'm getting ready that we're going to do a 3rd together. He's amazing. For me, what makes a really great actor that you want to work with over and over again is somebody who understands their craft, somebody who's got great sense of storytelling, but somebody who also wants to be collaborative. Because one of the things that I've learned as a director is you're hiring an actor because of their craft and their skill. So get out of their way and just be the person that guides them, adjusts them. My biggest directions to John are talk faster, talk slower. Try this, try that, because their instincts are so amazing. And there's so many actors, and you don't have to be a well-known big name actor to have that skill set. And so that's what I'm always looking for out of an actor that makes me want to work with them over and over again.
Perfect. What's your one single rule that you cannot break?
Follow your gut. Follow your gut. Yeah, I mean, it took me, unfortunately, it took me a long time to learn that. But if it's hitting me right here in the gut and it's saying, don't do this or do it a different way or whatever, when I haven't listened to it, things have gone wrong. And I may not even really understand in the moment why, but every time I don't listen to it, it shows me why.
It shuts down. We gotta break and reconfigure this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. So that's my number one rule is listen to my gut.
Perfect. What's been your favorite editing software to use? Everyone's done all this favoritism from Linux to now Premiere to Final Cut. It's like,
yeah. So I do edit. I am an editor. I actually, it's funny is I actually just circled back to Final Cut Pro as Final Cut's actually coming back as a professional system. I've edited on Avid. I mean, all the way back to Media Composer, but Avid, Premiere Pro, the old Final Cut, the new Final Cut.
Seemed like those companies were getting in kind of a measuring contest after a while as to who's more professional. I knew many 100%. Editors in Vegas using, I kid you not, Sony Vegas.
Yeah.
They just pressed for time to do a concert. It's like,
no, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't edit my own movies mainly because I want that additional voice that keeps me honest. And I want to see what the additional storyteller can bring to it. So obviously I let them edit on whatever system that they like to edit on. But I like to learn all of the systems because sometimes, particularly since COVID, where we tend to be working remotely, I like the ability that sometimes it's just faster for me to show my editor what I'm trying to do. And if I can do it in the same program that they're working in, I can just shoot it over and send it to them and go, here's more of what I was thinking. Yeah.
And last minute enhancement. That's great.
Exactly. So I've tried to, I'm by no means, a master of any of them, but I know enough of all of them that I can kind of cut stuff together and be able to provide that feedback. Yeah, exactly.
What's a bunch of film networking expos that are annual that you totally recommend everyone go to?
Funny enough, I don't really go to many of them.
No, that's fine.
I just haven't, but I think of any of them, the one biggie that I spent a lot of years going to was the AFM, the American Film Market in Santa Monica. I always found that one to be the most beneficial of all the ones I did. And of course you can buy the passes and you can do all of that, or you can just show up in the lobby and be able to network in the lobby, So, but that one was always the one that I found to be the most beneficial. And I haven't been since COVID. I don't think I'm going this year. I'll probably end up going again, but that was probably the one that of any of them that I ever did go to, that's the one that I recommend.
That's great. Cause everyone always likes to, go, hey, Sundance is mainstream indie, and then there's cons. It's like, but not everyone can afford to go to cons. So where do you find to where everyone's looking to buy content? And
the great thing about AFM is that it's other filmmakers, so you can interact with other filmmakers and talk to them. It's other producers, but it's also the salespeople, it's the distributors and the sales agents, and you can get to know them and become familiar with them. Because particularly when you're producing a movie, you've got to figure out what your business side is, what your distribution plan is going to be, what your actor values are going to be. And if you've built those relationships, you can kind of do the back and forth with them, to figure out what your values are and what your business model should be.
Oh, wonderful. And since you left the world of journalism and you've embraced various filmmaking routes, where do you think we are kind of now collected in terms of entertainment and media consumption? Do you think there's just we're trying to get past the oversaturation?
Well, that's the big thing. That's been the big conundrum for everybody. Is everything? There's so many platforms and so many providers and so many outlets, and how do you get your movie seen? I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that everybody's still figuring out. I mean, obviously the obvious answer is you get big name actors, and we're figuring out, and a lot of the aggregators are figuring it out too, like, for example, if I release a movie and I don't know, Comcast is going to release it on pay-per-view. They've got tiers that you slide into based on the amount of publicity or marketing or who's in the movie and stuff like that. So now they're doing things like, hey, if you release the movie in 10 theaters, for a week, we'll put you in this slot of visibility.
That's cool to know. Because it seemed like for a while everyone was just doing a few subscriptions. It was the same thing with website marketing. I'm just telling you from this to that my father works in it, and so many people would after a while just say, well, now that I know, I can do it myself. So boom.
And so it's trying to figure out how to get your movie seen. That's an important element, especially if you can get those distributors there, because there's a lot of distributors now that are like, if we're going to pump in money into a movie, we're going to give it some level of theatrical release, because then we get higher visibility on all of the platforms. People are more likely to see it. They're going to advertise it more. So that's become a really big thing. And then I think for the, like when I started, you could rely on word of mouth and advertising and things like that. So you could make a movie for X number of dollars, even though you got to get up to here. And I think what we're seeing more right now is you have to figure out how much are you going to get from the distributors and sales agents and make it for that amount, because that's pretty much what you're going to get. You can't hope for the big visibility and the big word of mouth and all of that drives the sales beyond the budget. So you try to make the movie for the amount that it's going to sell for initially.
That's very insightful. I mean, I know you would be insightful, but it's just very cool to know is like, okay, that's how it is. Because for a while, it seemed like everyone was just using a service, but it only gave you this X amount, and it was beneficial to some, but not to all. So it is cool to know that based on your current placement determines your current placement on visibility on other places.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now that, again, all the cable networks and streaming apps are changing up, how do you think the movie channels are changing it up? Like, I noticed Showtime is, I saw aired a few of your movies, like Survivalist has been on all this month, but how are they changing in terms of how they bid on what content from what distributors to?
It's an ever evolving thing. I can't really put my finger on like to say one thing. The one thing I do know is like all of those different sort of networks and channels and platforms and stuff, they're always paying attention to all of their competition. So of course they're always going after for whatever the hot thing at the moment is. They're always kind of going after the genre that might be lacking on other platforms. And as one platform, as the fiscal reports and revenue reports and that kind of thing comes out, if one platform's having a problem, you'll see another platform suddenly jump in, and try to take it over. And so, because obviously we're seeing, Hulu's probably the more recent one, where Hulu and Apple TV have really kind of started to rise in the amount of original content they're taking on. Shudder's kind of jumped in in the genre world as a huge aggregator of original content. I think more and more what we're seeing is less movies getting made that just kind of show up on all of these platforms, and more platforms trying to find something that they can call an original to their platform, and then eventually Tubi 100%, So I think it's funny as I think everything is just always constantly changing so rapidly, particularly because of COVID. COVID really threw everything into a tailspin that I think we're all still trying to figure out where we're going at this point as everything tries to kind of even keel out. And I think everybody still has the PTSD of COVID. And so everybody wants more content that they actually need right now. And so
they're not impatient. Me.
And they're afraid that if this happens again, we have enough content, so they're kind of backlogging themselves so they know that they can stay ahead of it.
So a year off at this rate.
Yeah. And the only problem with that I keep seeing is that the more we're oversaturating, the less the movie's value is. So there's constantly this give and take, and it's up and down. Yeah. It's like, I remember way back when some of the consumer HD cameras came out and people started shooting movies on those. And I remember talking to a distributor where we were trying to sell a movie up front before it was made. And the distributor's like, why would I do that when I've got 500 movies sitting here to choose from? And that's a thing that that's an ebb and flow thing that I still have seen over all of the years, that the more saturated things become, the less valuable the movies become, and then eventually it will sort of bottom out and the saturation will start to stop. And then the distributors start to clamor for it again. And then the values start to go back up again.
It's even more chaotic than the stock market, basically.
100%. 100%.
Basically do a movie version of fantasy football, but for streaming.
Yeah, well, and I mean, COVID was a wonderful example of that because it was oversaturated. COVID tanked everything. Everybody ran out of content, and then everybody's willing to pay premium dollar for anything just to continue putting something original and new up. Well, now they're oversaturated, so now we're starting to see that decline again, where the values are starting to go down because they don't need as much anymore.
Totally. And now we've had to remind the market, hey, we can have it all. I personally have both physical media, streaming, and cable, but many will only do one of those free options. They did. Everyone's pressed for. So it is funny. It's like they're willing to pay top dollar, and yet they still want to save $1.
Yeah. So, and that's why I tell everybody, and why my own model is still is the same right now, which is get yourself in with somebody for your specific movie and make the movie for that amount of money. And that way you don't lose. Because I remember a philosophy that I've always carried is that if I want to keep making movies, I have to keep making money. And it's not necessarily that investors or equity people, or whatever, have to make a bunch of money as long as they're not losing money. And so as long as I can keep breaking even, I can keep making movies because I'm viable to money people.
Perfect. What's been probably the best formula for doing elevator pitches and other just business meets? I know there's several.
No. It's a very funny question, and I know so many people that do the seminars and the workshops and the pitches.
Interview questions are outdated nowadays. Half the time they don't want to know where you went. They're like, "Can you do this job?" No. Okay, bye.
Yeah, I've always been. Yeah, no, exactly. I've always been one of those people. I've never followed a formula. I've always been one of those people that I just try to be. I get very excited by movies, and I get very excited by the movies I'm pitching, so that enthusiasm and energy can be infectious. And I've always found to just, I rather than trying to talk up to somebody, I've always just tried to talk to them one-on-one, like it's two people hanging out somewhere and having a conversation, and just try to get them excited by my excitement.
This is rubbing off on me. This is great. Yeah. By the way, do you always wear a fedora? I've had that for a while. I would always coincidentally wear that.
Nope, I just happen to be a baldy, so sometimes
no, it's fine. I always love the fedora. It kind of just got everyone in the mode, and sometimes everyone would be sarcastic. All right, Joel Silver's on the scene. I'm like, no, it's just what I'm wearing.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. I love my caps.
Let's wear it. How do you think everyone's going to be dealing, since unfortunately COVID's going to be still keeps getting politicized, and you're always going to have someone, crew member, who wants to come to set but refuses vaccination?
So, I mean, that's an interesting question, because we do see that. I mean,
or they hope that they don't get picked or asked 20 questions,
Yeah. I mean, the COVID protocols keep changing. I know the unions are probably going to be putting out something new in the next couple of weeks as to what new protocols are. I mean, I think the main protocol now for most productions is what we call a fully vaccinated show, that you have to show proof of vaccination to be hired. And I've been involved. Yeah. And I've been involved in a couple of shows where sadly people that I've worked with before didn't want to be vaccinated, and I couldn't hire them. Yeah. And I don't know what's happened since then.
Personal, guys.
No, it's nothing personal, but the way the unions work, you have to follow the union protocols. For Screen Actors Guild, Directors Guild, IOTC, things like that, depending on which ones you're utilizing or not utilizing. But you got to keep people.
Non-union ones. I just had so many guys just breaking the rules, and like, I'm not telling you how to do your job. I can't help you. I can scout a location for you. I can give you a list of other invaluable contacts. I'm not going to be at the
Yeah.
meeting with you.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, there's enough people that want to work, that are vaccinated, that want to follow the rules, that I just, like, for me personally, I don't want to tell anybody what to do and
Yeah.
what not to do. But, my job is to protect the money. And I can't take the chance of a show getting shut down because people didn't want to follow certain rules.
Exactly. And
I've seen that. I know of at least 3 productions that didn't want to follow COVID protocols and hired a bunch of people, and the people got sick and they shut down. And those 3 movies have never been completed because of it. And I've been involved in a couple of movies where people did get sick, even though we followed all the protocols, and it still cost us, $100,000, $200,000 to eventually go back and make it up and shoot the stuff that we lost. So to me, it's a small give, in an unfortunate time, to be able to make sure that you get your movies done.
Basically, it's an evolved kind of sickness. And did you always have a formula even before this, when someone had a inevitable sick day, years before COVID, go home, plan this reshoot?
No, it's funny, as I hate to say it, but probably before COVID, it was like people would just show up to set with colds, and you would give them medicine, and everybody would keep working, and then eventually half the crews got a cold, and you're still continuing to work. I think COVID for me has absolutely changed all of that, though.
Yeah.
And just having to be hypersensitive and hyper aware. Yeah.
Like the third day, you're still registering as infected, but you're like, I feel great. I'm like, well, so either do a Zoom meeting, planning, scheduling conference, or just
because I even know of at least 1 or 2, at least 2 productions where, honestly, the director got COVID. And they basically, but that, funny enough, they were able to make it work where the director was apart from everybody. They set up a tent, they set up a monitor, they had a radio.
Oh, wow.
And nobody went to the tent. The director just relayed everything over the radio and off of the monitor. Yeah. And so I've seen a couple of shows be able to get through that, but it's not worth it if a crew member that's not, I hate saying it this way, but it doesn't have to be part of the decision making. It's easier to just step aside for a few days, replace yourself. Let's keep everybody safe and healthy, and then come back as soon as you're ready to go.
Still get the credit. You'll still be here the remaining 6 days.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
Personal. It's not a contest.
That's exactly it. We've got a job that has to be completed.
And there's no such thing as an Alan Smithy in this world, so suck it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
No fear of disowning it. That hurts everybody involved if you disown.
That's exactly it.
And since again, you came into this from the journalism aspect, how have you observed how that's been changing with everything going digital with papers now?
The one thing that's kind of always sort of bothered me, and it's from, that's from filmmaking to journalism to reviews to whatever, particularly because of digital, particularly because of the internet, is that anybody can do it. And I don't, it's funny is I don't read reviews like of my movies. I don't read reviews anymore. It's not worth it. The thing that I miss, and that's even true, just like stepping aside from movies, but even like the news world, where when news used to be a not-for-profit, people who were truly trying to tell the news and be investigative and be journalistic. And unfortunately, now that anybody can be that, I think we've lost the integrity of it. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad to that. And it's difficult to find that, it's still there for sure, but you have to really kind of pick and choose. And particularly like we were just talking about reviews and stuff, I don't want to say who, but there's a handfuls of reviewers that if they review, I do go watch, I do go read. And even if it's, a bad review, it's still constructive. And I can understand because it's never hateful. And I think that's the big difference. I've read reviews. I've read reviews where people are like, Jon Keeyes needs to go back working as a barista at Starbucks. Okay, I never worked at Starbucks. But how is that, journalism?
Help me.
How is that? That's not helping anybody. That's just being me. versus being constructive of why you as an individual like or don't like something and what
they're
can be learned from that.
probably auditioning to be on Slant Magazine or Red Letter Media, and you're like, okay, well, you're gonna eventually piss someone off. At least the Mystery Science Theater guys didn't claim to be film critics; they're just making fun of a movie.
They're just making fun of it. Yeah, exactly. You know exactly what you're getting out of them,
right? And it just seems like every other person wants to, yes, abuse the format. And sometimes I've seen two other podcasters get into bickering with each other online. Is like, okay, well, I don't think anyone's going to see your podcast because they're seeing you two argue about the merit of each other's podcasts.
Right. Exactly.
And there's movies, same deal. It's easy to work with everybody. And sometimes I see almost kind of a witch hunt as one indie filmmaker, makes infamous movies. So therefore, any other people assume that the other indie filmmakers' movies are also trash. And it's like, well,
every person needs to earn their own merit. Yeah, every person needs to earn their own merit.
Mm-hmm. I've seen a bunch of them when DVDs were still a thing. We're talking 2010. They would just literally go to Walmart and just buy all their copies of their movie back. I'm like, that's
yeah,
gonna be sustainable.
No, exactly. It's not.
I don't think anyone's gonna buy this $60 rare B movie you made 5 years ago on eBay.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, one thing, like a couple of things that I've learned is the best I could do is make a movie that I'm happy with, and I hope other people like it, and most of the time, if you're honest with yourself, you know what works and what doesn't work about your own movie. So if somebody wants to point out what's not working, I feel like if you're, you should be able to see it yourself, and go, yeah, you're right. Own it, own it, learn from it. I mean, I was a huge, Tony Scott was a huge inspiration for me as a filmmaker. And I got to meet Tony a couple of times as a journalist. Always loved Tony. Yeah, I absolutely adored Tony. But one of the things that Tony said, I mean, one of the highest grossing directors of all time, worked with the biggest actors of all time. And Tony would say, when I get done with a movie, I can't, because he'd wear his, his whole jumper vest with all of his pockets and stuff and notebooks.
Top hat.
But every movie he'd do, he would keep a list of things that he felt he did wrong on that movie, so he could do it differently on the next movie. No matter what movie he was making, he was always trying to learn to become a better filmmaker by learning from his own mistakes.
See, that's
and I'm
great.
I'm like, Tony, that's why you're Tony.
Jealousy about, this guy made this, or what I could have, or he made the twin movie of the movie I'm making. It's just like,
exactly. Or the arrogance of thinking you can do no wrong and everybody doesn't understand you.
And arguing with journalists, I'll take that 1-star review back. I object.
Yeah, exactly. I loved the fact that Tony always wanted to learn from his own mistakes and grow.
I'm glad you got to meet him.
Yeah, I'm too.
I've been around late 90s, early 2000s.
Early 2000s. Yeah, early 2000s. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I remember he even did an interview where he was talking about the first time when he was doing Man on Fire, and he was meeting Dakota Fanning, who was, I don't know, 10 at the time, something like that. But Tony was we were meeting at Mel's Diner on Sunset Boulevard, and I'm waiting, I got there first, and he's like, I suddenly realized my palms were sweating because I was getting nervous about meeting Dakota Fanning because she's such an amazing actress. And I'm just like, oh God, Tony, I love you. That's amazing.
Right. Some stars just made it, and he's intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the guy's grossed tens of billions, and yet here look at that.
Nothing is sacred. Nothing is easy.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. Any other upcoming projects and just great chats and events that you've been seeing that you think everyone should check out?
Well, I mean, I think, I produced a movie called Bandit with Josh Duhamel and Mel Gibson and Alicia Cuthbert that just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's doing really well. I'm really happy with how that turned out. We produced a movie in the spring called The Kill Room with Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson. It'll come out, middle of next year. And then I got to direct 2 movies. I just recently got back from directing 2 movies in Ireland. The Last Girl and The Cleanup Crew with Antonio Banderas. So I just directed those. So I'm kind of editing those, and those will probably start coming out like late spring or early summer. So that's what we've really been focused on, and trying to get those all done and out to everybody and stuff. And then, like usual, I've got 6 to 10 things I'm trying to get off the ground, and we'll see which one happens first.
That's wonderful. And plus, you've been able to avoid all the other infamous producers now.
Right.
Randall Emmett's got a lawsuit from his abuse of Bruce Willis and other stars, and Weinstein's not around anymore. So indie filmmaking's looking pretty good on the horizon.
Yep. Work with people you love. That's what I always like to say. Work with people you want to work with.
No interference.
Yeah, exactly.
Any highly anticipated festivals?
No, I haven't really we haven't really been doing festivals anymore, just because of the way the distribution world is.
Digital screenings?
No, not really. Yeah, pretty much everything. We're basically aiming at day and date releases, and so we haven't really. Kill Room we don't know what, but we'll probably work on that, getting that into a festival. We did Rare Objects that Katie Holmes directed. IFC is involved in that. IFC will place it somewhere. But yeah, I think more and more unless you're a huge tentpole type of movie, at a Sundance, you don't really see the sales coming out of the festivals anymore. And most of our movies get set up now. Most of the stuff I'm doing, we're already set up with the distributor and sales agent before we've made the movie. So, we're basically making it and turning it over to them. And they're mostly just going after day and date releases now rather than festivals.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that saves you time,
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I love festivals. I love going to film festivals and stuff like that. But, they really, there's the creative part of that I really love. But then there's also the business, and making movies for festivals really doesn't help with the business model anymore.
No. And yeah, I've seen some recent pitch meetings where people were networking, but virtually no one walked out with each other's card. I was like, yeah. Well, so that was not a good use of anyone's 2 hours.
Exactly. Yeah. So go after the straight distribution.
Boom.
Yeah.
So one last question before we take off here. So when you're with your producing assignments, that can be so many different ranges of assignments. What's been the biggest task that you've seen yourself doing, from, again, line producing to doing rewrites to overseeing?
I think the biggest task is really getting that movie set up. I always joke that 90% of filmmaking is finding money, distribution, and actors. And that's always the biggest hurdle. Is 90% of my time, we'll spend a year trying to find the right project, attach actors, find a distributor, find the financing to go with it. You spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then suddenly it all clicks, and then you're done shooting the movie 2 months later. So yeah, the monumental task is always that initial hurdle that you have to get over to get into filmmaking and stuff. The rest of it, I've been doing this for so long. The rest of it just second nature. You always know that you're going to run into challenges and obstacles and things that you just kind of have to deal with and stuff. But that biggest challenge that you're always kind of facing and fighting is just getting those 3 elements together so you can actually get your movie made. Perfect. And persistence always pays off.
Persistence. Love it.
Yep.
Okay. Well, any other just closing arguments, my dude?
Closing arguments. Just never give up. That's what I would tell every filmmaker. Never give up. That's way back when. I remember reading an interview with David Cronenberg early in his career, and he was like, and he was successful in Canada, and he was a name and stuff. But he's like, yeah, but he was still like, I would wake up in the morning and be defeated and just be like, I can't do this anymore. And then he'd be like, lie there for 5 minutes and be like, but I can't do anything else. So he, claw his way out of bed and face another day. And then The Fly came along, and of course that broke him out internationally. And I go through that, I've got my my days, my weeks, my months, depending on where the economy's at and where the business is at, where I'm like, I can't do this anymore, but I can't do anything else. So I just tell everybody, if you want to do this, just take the attitude of you can't do anything else.
Bingo. Go out for a bike ride and then come back ready to party.
Exactly.
Okay, well, this has been very inspirational, which is what the intent of this whole sit down is. So thank you ever so much for, doing this about, wow, we're under an hour. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I love talking about movies.
Absolutely. I look forward to your next project, sir, and I will check out Codename Banshee.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right. Godspeed to you.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like RoboCop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift. The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US, we are in the UK, we are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a